All right, here we go.
Hi, I'd like to bring this meeting of the Urbana USD116 Equity Task Force to order. It is 5:34 p.m. on Thursday, October 21st. Normally we would do a roll call here, but in this virtual format, it's kind of hard to do that. So I'm just going to read everybody's names who's showing up here in the list. We have John Gutzmer, Jennifer Ivory Tatum, Beth Ladd, Brandon Caffey, Christine Lee, Elizabeth Smith Andre, Philippe Menentau, Katie Madigan, Sherry Giddens, Trisha Kasem, Will Villafore, and Todd Taylor's here now, and see, well, people are coming on.
Nate Wall.
Oh, Nate Wall, thanks. We need to probably find a better way of doing this formally. But at the end,
I'll get a screenshot at the end. We can.
Okay, great.
To the minutes, and then I think Sandy.
Yeah, people are popping in and out, so we're going to need to be able to record roll somehow. In any case, this is a public meeting, so the beginning of the meeting, we offer the public an opportunity to offer public comment. So if you wish to make a public comment, I guess you can indicate by unmuting and making the comment. We'll pause here for about 20 seconds to allow you to do that. Okay, hearing none, and there was none received at our email address. We'll move forward with the published agenda. I'd like to pass over control of the meeting to Jennifer.
All right. So since we just finished opening the meeting, you want to talk about that really quickly, Paul, about how you'd like to do that moving forward? I know you kind of took the reins today, but
yeah, sure. So basically, we've learned that. And this comes out of a 2019 court ruling of existing Open Meetings Act law that any subcommittee of the board that does board work, and this committee certainly does that, is writing board policy, right? Doesn't matter if there's 0 or 1 board members on this committee. It is subject to the Open Meetings Act. So we need to basically do a set of things that every open meeting needs to have done. We need to call roll at the beginning. We need to take minutes and approve minutes. We need to publish our agendas 48 hours in advance and post them on the website or post them in the building the meeting's being held. Need to offer the public the opportunity to attend and watch, either virtually or in person. And we need to offer to the public to have a public comment section. It's all that stuff. So any one of us can run this meeting formally, so we can have a chair and basically a vice chair to run this meeting in the event that the main chair couldn't attend. So if people have a preference as to who should run this meeting, whether it be one of the sitting board members on it or someone else who would like to do it, I guess I'd like to open the floor for that discussion. Does anybody have any real preference on that? As hearing none, I guess I'll just continue to do it if that's all right with everybody. That's great. I guess then now we can move forward with the published agenda.
So Paul, did we approve the agenda? Did somebody make a motion to approve it?
Right.
I make a motion. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I make a motion to approve the agenda for the October 21st Equity Task Force Committee.
Is there a second?
I second that motion. This is Sandy.
All right, thanks, Sandy.
All right, thank you, Sandy.
So basically, all who approve, please say aye. Yeah.
Aye.
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 Many ayes. Any opposed, please indicate by saying no.
Okay.
All right. We have an approved agenda.
And we could maybe use reactions too. Like we could have people use the reaction in the Zoom and like, thumbs up or a hands up or something.
That would be
Maybe that we can do that
efficient.
moving forward.
We'll
Yep.
do that, yeah, we'll do that in other votes.
Okay. All right. So I know a lot of you rushed from our last meeting and we had a meeting that ended at 5:15. So we had to kind of leave the high school and everybody had to get to a space to Zoom. So thanks for that, everyone. You have the agenda. I know we have a published agenda for the public, but we also have our own kind of, tasks that we are going to talk about. Moving forward, the agendas that we've had since January, February, we're adding them to the website. So, we've kind of had our agenda format that we've been using. This agenda will also be added to the website as well. So the first topic that I'd like to talk about is we do have an approved draft of our policy as of Tuesday the 19th. So yay for that. The first thing I really would like some feedback. We just had an administrative cabinet meeting, so I had this discussion with the administrators as well, but I really want feedback from this group. So now that we have a draft of the policy, I'm anxious to get it out. The task force is gonna, as our agenda says, really start the work of the equity assessment audit, but I don't want to lose the feedback opportunities that we will be able to garner from sharing our policy with multiple stakeholders. So as we discussed on Tuesday, and here I can share my screen. Let me pop back over here. Okay, so everybody can see that. I can make it a little bit bigger. Okay, so some of the spaces that I've been talking about really sharing the policy are kind of listed here. So I'm really anxious to get this in front of, it's been shared with our administrators as of today. We had an administrative meeting. I asked all the principals to send me their PTA dates and PTO dates and PTSA, and I'd like to go, and any of you can come with me to do that. I've also asked the administrators to share their staff meetings. And to get a couple of options, right, where I can come and we can kind of do a road show and try to hit every single building within the next couple of months. Family forum spaces that Dion runs, any of our parent academy meetings. I'd really like to get some student voice via some of our clubs, extracurriculars. Even I know Dr. Caffey, Brandon, and a couple of colleagues are running some student mentor groups at the elementary levels. So that would be a space to even have these conversations, I think, even with elementary students. And I really would like to create a feedback form, but I also want to have an idea of what feedback we're looking like, what as a committee do we really want people to give us feedback on? So I don't know that we've had conversations at the board level about the words, right? That the words are really heavy words and they're intense words, and that it is a really wordy policy. So I guess my question for the group is I'd like to know, like, what would be our best feedback options? I'm thinking of kind of two things here. So when we go to these spaces, I'd like to be able to have like a link where I could share a link. I could share the policy ahead of time. So say I'm going to the Thomas Paine, I'm looking at Mr. Majors. I know he has PTA meetings that are really active. So if when Mr. Majors invites me to come to talk to his PTA, we would share the policy ahead of time, give them a couple of days to look at it. I could go and talk with a couple people about, what we hope we're able to achieve moving forward with some of our work, and then either leave a link that people can go in at the end of that discussion and leave their feedback, or I can even bring paper copies for people who aren't as comfortable with that and would like to give us feedback on paper. And we'll just every time I go and do one of those, or every time any of you go and we do something like that, we'll have a way to keep track of all the feedback that we collect. So the first thing I really want people to be able to give us feedback on is what are the things that they like about the policy? So what are the strengths? I think would be a good question. I don't want it to be too weighty. I'm thinking just 2 or 3, maybe 3 or 4 questions and that's it. Definitely have a section for comments. People can leave comments at the end. I'd love to ask about strengths. So what are you guys thinking would be some good, if we keep the feedback questions to 2 or 3 or 4, and that's it. What are other people's thoughts? John, is your hand raised to talk about this, or is your hand raised for something else?
That was raised to approve the agenda. Sorry.
Okay. Other thoughts about feedback that we could collect?
Hi, Jennifer, it's Christy.
Yes.
I like the idea of keeping it short. And I also like the idea of, maybe, list 2 or 3 things that you like about it and 2 or 3 things that you think could be improved. And
Yep.
that kind of keeps it short. And then we can, if you get lots of feedback, that kind of keeps it contained.
Mm-hmm. I like that.
I've also been thinking about, I'm not quite sure if this survey is the right time to put this question in. Maybe it's for the future, but like, where do you see yourself like helping with this policy in our district? No matter who that is, I think that's important feedback that we get that makes sure that everyone in our whole community can help provide support for this. But again, I'm not really sure if this is the survey to ask that question or not.
I love that because we're going to be doing a lot of focus group conversations in the next few months when we start doing some of the equity audit work. There'll be multiple opportunities for parents, students, all these different groups, right, to be able to talk about the audit. This is a great way for us to find out who's interested in being part of that too. Like if they want to be, part of one of the action teams, or they want to be part of a focus group, that's a great way for them to indicate that. So I think that is a good space for this. Anybody else? I'm kind of keeping notes in there for.
Yeah, I think actually Nate raised his hand first.
Say that again, Felipe.
That Nate.
Nate raised his hand.
Yes, Nate. I didn't.
So,
Oh,
yeah. So I think this could also go just, in the comments, but also to be more intentional. I would like to know what people's anticipated outcomes or positive, what are you hoping will manifest as a result of the audit, as a result of the equity work? What are we working toward? I know that we have goals. However, I think that goals are often reimagined as some of that work gets done. So I think that a running goal or outcome or result anticipation space is what will keep us focused on the solution. Often stuff like this lets us kind of shine a light on what's missing and shine a light on our disparities. And I think that if we continue to focus on where we're trying to get, then we might not be bogged down by where we are or where we have been previously.
Yeah, thanks, Nate. Felipe.
Yeah, so I had actually a question about, kind of like a procedural question. What our goals are regarding the feedback, because I think an important part of the language that we're saying is that this is a draft, right? And it's not ready, and because if it were ready, then there wouldn't be any point of requiring feedback. But now we know that at the same time, we want to move forward. But I would actually pose the question that probably, I think when you're working on a document and when you're working on some kind of policy, I would say that probably half of I think that half of the work, or half of what you're going to achieve, is actually in the process. I would say that the process is, in cases like this, is particularly subjects so delicate like this, is the process. It can be as important as the result, or the process is what's going to lead us to the result. So I'm posing a question to the group in terms of what are our goals for actually getting feedback. right? Are our goals to get feedback to improve the text, change the text, or what I would suggest, in addition to the, all of those, I think we want to probably, I would suggest, get some buy-in from the community. And at the same time, I don't want to use the word as selling it, because I hate to be in that position, but I cannot come with another one at this moment. But I think we want to probably rally the community, get buy-in from people that we often don't hear, and use this exercise of getting feedback really as an excuse to get the community involved and hopefully buy in. Because I would say, and I'm only speaking for myself, that when we're actually asking for feedback, we're not asking to change. I would not like the feedback to actually change the core of what we have discussed or work on, because I don't think that anybody wants to do that, right? There's a certain set of values that I think that are important to us. And in a way, when we talk about feedback, this is, I'm going to be blunt, we're actually thinking about how we're going to polish it, or how we're going to tweak it, or actually open new conversations, which I think is important. So maybe we need to think about what are the things that we're willing to probably change, maybe everything we're willing to change, or whether we want to do this actually as an exercise to involve the community and get more buy-in. So I would put that to the group to think about what are the, this is a little bit of soul search, what actually is what we want to achieve.
I think the goal, for feedback, I think getting buy-in is important, but I think it's also important, while we are a diverse group, we have a lot of different perspectives here. There are other perspectives out there that maybe none of us have thought of. So I like the idea of having it out and getting buy-in. To me, it shows transparency in the process, which is something that, in past years, a lot of people have not been happy with. So you're showing people the process, and, yes, we have to think about what we are willing to change, but I can't say definitive, until I hear another perspective, I can't say what I may or may not change. And I don't want to go into the feedback process with the mindset of, well, we're asking for your feedback, but we're not going to change anything, because that kind of diminishes anybody's desire to give feedback in the future, and diminishes their trust in that you're actually being transparent, that you would just be putting something out there, oh, well, they're asking for our feedback, but they really don't want it. So if we're asking for the feedback, we have to be receptive to it. And if we disagree with the feedback, that's fine, but we have to be receptive to it, or there's no point in asking for it.
I completely agree with you on that. And actually, that's exactly what I was, setting this, this discussion. So we are actually clear about what our expectations are. We're asking for feedback. We need to be willing to receive all kinds of feedback, and then discuss how we implement it. But it's, in a way, when we're doing this, kind of like everything could be potentially on the table, even if it seems uncomfortable. And that's actually the price, I guess, of transparency and trying to get buy-in from the community.
Yeah, so again, I think based on everyone's comments, it's important to remember that as we go through the audit process with the consultant, that we will be very intentional about getting voices from individuals that we have not heard from, individuals who have not been a part of this task force. And so that the actual policy itself will not be finalized until the audit has been completed, and that we've heard from all those individuals that we think we need to hear from or have been willing to share with us. And so the document, even once we present the final copy to the board, will still remain a living, breathing document, subject to change at any point in time. And I think it's important to continue to reiterate that at no point in time will this policy become a static policy, not subject to change.
Oh, well said, Dr. Caffey. I could try to summarize, I guess, the board discussion from 2 nights ago, but essentially the word draft was left on this because of precisely that. We're expecting that as the result of the audit, that there will be data to there'll be data collected that will basically validate a lot of the work that we said here about what the issues are in the district, that we can support a lot of these policy statements with data. And there may very well be changes made to what we want to do coming out of the work from the audit itself. The other bit of it was that we wanted to ensure that particularly students had an opportunity to voice any issues or any give feedback on this draft policy.
Okay, thanks Felipe for helping us clarify that. I agree 100% with what Dr. Caffey said, what Christy said, what Paul said, with Felipe. I think that all of those things are kind of our goals over the next few months as we kind of take this around and share it with our community. Anybody else want to weigh in on the goal? Or I know Dr. Caffey, our consultant, prospective consultant, is joining us at 6, correct still? Is that still? Okay, so we've still got a few more minutes. Any other comments on the questions? Christy, I saw your comment in the chat, so I've kind of added that to what Elizabeth shared with us. Would you like to be involved in this process and how can we contact you? I like that. We've got Nate's comment added. These are 4 really, I mean, I really do kind of want to limit it to about 4 things.
Hey, Jennifer.
Yes.
I wasn't necessarily going to comment specifically on the questions, but just knowing the depth and the length of the draft policy, just as we think about sharing it out with families, we may want to think about starting to get that translated.
So, yeah, we already are getting it translated. So we didn't start that process until after the draft was approved. So we
of
had
course.
not, yeah. So we are, Spanish is already in progress and French has been a little trickier because we have a lot of translations out right now and French moves a little bit slower, but the Spanish is already starting.
Awesome, thanks.
Yeah, it was on my list. So I see our consultant has joined us. So before she joins us, I just want to, John, before you let her in, I just want to kind of, so I've took some notes on our document. Anybody that wants to add anything, you can. So I'm going to show our agenda really quickly. So just to give you guys just the background. So as soon as our meeting, I mean, Dr. Caffey and I are ready to go. As soon as our last meeting was over, Brandon and I started kind of reaching out, and he'd already been doing a little investigative work with some people that are already doing this work in different spaces across the state. So we set up our first meeting with Dr. Dubio, who's going to come in, and we're going to let her kind of introduce herself and give you an opportunity to meet her. So what we did is we spent about an hour and a half with her talking through multiple things, right? There's a lot of layers to what the work that she'd be able to do with us. So I linked Brandon and I, we took notes and kind of compiled our notes together. So our notes are linked on our document that you can read at some point about. There's some professional development pieces. There's the equity audit, the implementation plan. So we will be able, through one person, instead of just, consulting with someone who is just going to give us help us through the auditing process. Dr. Dubio can also help us through the equity action plan, implementation plan piece, which is really important as well. So those 2 things will be able to intersect. So I just wanted to let you know those notes are there. Okay. And then I sent you an email earlier with some attachments. Now she is very protective of her intellectual property. So on all the attachments, I made sure I said, this was her work, but I wanted you guys to kind of, because, we don't have an hour and a half or 2 hours tonight for her to kind of walk through everything, which is what she did for Brandon and I, but I wanted you to have that. So please, don't share that with anybody else. It was really just for you to see what her, a little bit of background about what she will be able to do for us. Okay, so Brandon, when we bring her in, I'll let you kind of introduce her, and since you had a few more conversations with her than I have, so, and we'll just spend a little time kind of getting a little overview, and this is also, for me, is very important, and I think we talked about that here too. We need to have someone who is going to be a good fit in terms of being a facilitator that we all feel like we can work with, because we're going to be spending a lot of time with this person via Zoom, activities that we'll do, reaching out back and forth. So we need to feel comfortable that this is somebody who will also work well with our group. Okay. Any questions before we let her in? All right. Okay, John. Let me stop sharing, sorry.
Is she in?
Yes, she's at the bottom there. There she is.
Hi.
Trying to expand my view because I don't have a view of her. Oh, I see her. Okay. Well, welcome, Dr. Dubiel. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
You're more than welcome. Assembled here tonight is our Equity Task Force. And so I'm just going to invite you to speak a little bit about your company and the work that you do in terms of equity audits, a little bit about your background and experience. For those of you who are here tonight, I first became aware of Dr. Dubiel when I was working as an administrator in the Unit 5 school district. I was a part of a process of selecting who the district may actually go with to do an equity audit. I've been familiar with some of her other work that she's done in terms of professional development. And in each instance, I've been more than impressed with the work that she does, the quality of work that she does, and how responsive she is when you have questions and you need assistance. And so it is my pleasure to welcome Dr. Yvette Dubiel to our group tonight. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Brandon. Really appreciate that. I guess I can start with my background and then some of the services we offer and field questions. Happy to field questions throughout. So a little bit about me. I've been a teacher. I've been a classroom teacher, general education, as well as a sheltered instruction. I've been an administrator. I've been an administrator longer than I've been a teacher. I've also been an executive director for a regional office of education. I was one of the first educational equity directors in the state for a large unit district in Illinois. And then I was recruited to work for the Regional Office of Education in DuPage, which oversees 42 school districts. As I started off at Indian Prairie School District, is where I was the equity director. And then prior to that, I had another administrative role in another district. Indian Prairie is one of the first school districts, certainly not the only one, almost 10 years ago, that had an equity person. And so what ended up happening is that there were a lot of superintendents, a lot of neighboring districts, not just neighboring, but they were interested in tapping into our resources. So they actually contacted my superintendent to get permission to borrow me. Of course, on my free time, I had to take time off of work, so it wouldn't be a conflict of interest. And I mentioned that because what it ended up happening was it allowed me to build relationships with other school districts. So I ended up doing consulting on the side for other school districts while maintaining my full-time job as an equity director in a district. A lot of things happened in that short amount of time. It got the attention of the Regional Office of Education. They recruited me to do the same thing, bring my work there. Everybody came with me. And then it just wasn't, I wanted to go solo. So I've been solo full time for a year now, but I have been doing this for almost 10 years. So one of the, and then I also am the founding, sorry, so much going on. I'm the founder of the Illinois Coalition of Educational Equity Leaders. So it is the only organization in the state of Illinois, and we support and network with equity directors in pre-K to 12 school districts, but it's not just for DEI directors. There's also superintendents, assistant superintendents. We have hundreds of people in that cohort. It's only for, again, staff. I am also one of the authors of the recently passed culturally responsive teaching and learning standards. So I sat on the Diverse Learner and Teacher Ready Network. And then I teach at 2 different universities. One is for teachers who are getting their master's in CNI with an ESL and LBS endorsement, and then an undergrad class on diversity and social justice, as well as a graduate and doctorate course. So teachers who are pursuing principal leadership, as well as doctorate students who are getting their doctorate in social justice and equity, which is what I have my doctorate in. And then prior to that, I had another career, but we don't want to get into that. All right, so the services that I offer, one of the things I shared with the Brandon and superintendent is a multitude of services. And ultimately, it's going to come down to you choosing what makes the most sense for your community. No 2 districts are alike. I've had clients that are in neighboring districts, and frankly, they couldn't be more different. So I'll describe the equity audit process. So,
Dr. Dubio, can I?
Yes,
So
please,
I have
please.
I still kept your links up from our meeting. So I can share those while you're talking, and the documents that you shared with Brandon and I. Would that be helpful? Like the equity audit one and the.
Yeah, but I would ask that you refrain from the second page one.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
And I can talk through those pages through it anyway. All right. So one of the things that's important is, first of all, equity audit has that negative connotations associated with an audit, but it is a proactive opportunity for districts to take a gauge on how they're doing with equity, take a pulse. So we conduct equity audits not only of school districts, but as well as non-for-profit organizations, or help them create an equity action plan. When it comes to organizations taking a pulse on equity, an equity audit is not the only service that exists, but it is one of the most popular services. Now, the equity audit for a school district, the way we do it, it's a 9 to 12 month process, and there are 5 phases to the equity audit. The first phase involves the district assembling a team, and it might be you all. It's a minimum of 25 people, and I'll share with you the reasoning behind that. And it should be a diverse representation of staff, and I'll also share that because sometimes people ask, well, what about community members and students? So the district has to first have the pre-phase, and in meeting with whoever the decision makers are at the district, they're going to have to put this team together. We call it a DELT, a district equity leadership team. You can absolutely call it whatever you want. So let's talk about the makeup of the DELT. Now, one of the things I advocate for is that DELT is of staff only. Now, please know there's been a lot of flexibility with that. I have 3 reasons as to why I advocate for staff only. First, in creating what I hope is the equity, not only just the equity audit, because this shouldn't be a one and done, this should be a long-term commitment. Eventually, what's going to come out of the audit is making sure we tap on community stakeholders, staff. When I say community, staff, students, and families, they're going to help be key people to creating a plan. And in creating this plan, even though we're not there yet with the audit, the idea is you're going to use the same people. So it's very purposeful to think about those same groups of people. And yes, there's, people drop out or things happen, but to use the same core of people following the equity audit and what should follow after the equity audit. So in the action plan that will happen eventually, the people that were going to come up with goals for the district, they're going to need to have access to confidential student records. So that's one reason why I advocate for DELT to be staff only, because there are legal mandates and limitations for the public non-staff member to have access. 2 is we can make sure staff attends meetings. There's obligations and there's commitment in putting this team together and the work they're going to do. And 3, the conversations. Oftentimes the conversations that will happen can feel like it's a personnel or it's a private issue. And we want to make and ensure that it's a comfortable atmosphere for everybody to converse. And that may not happen depending on the dynamics of who's in the committee. Now, that being said, there have absolutely been districts that said, well, we really want to get our community members involved, or we already have this group in place and we could just use the same group. Then let's use them. We can absolutely adjust. So when it comes to student record time, then frankly, we're legally obligated to excuse some people when we do that things. We will be very mindful of the conversations that we have, so it doesn't cross any personnel issues. So there's flexibility in that. And then I'll come back to the numbers, why 25, a minimum of 25 people. So again, the equity audit is a 9 to 12 month process, and there are 5 phases to it. So after the district assembles this team, during the equity audit, I only meet with this team one time, and that's during phase 1. For the phase 1 of the equity audit is typically a 4 to 5 hour meeting, and there's 3 major tasks that need to be accomplished during that time. The team will complete a needs assessment. That needs assessment will be a data point for the equity audit report. So in that needs assessment, the team will be evaluating and giving a rating to the district in 10 major components against the rubric that is in the needs assessment. The team will also determine the quantitative and qualitative direction of the audit. So the audit utilizes a mixed method research approach. The quantitative involves where the team is agreeing or disagreeing on what type of data they feel the district should gather, collect, and synthesize, and then be submitted so it can be analyzed with an equity lens. Now, they're not personally collecting it. They'll see a long list of that data consideration, and they'll decide as a group, have some conversation. What do we think? The qualitative part involves the focus groups. Who are the focus groups and what questions to ask? Typically, your unit district. So we have 4 unit districts or high school districts. We have 4 focus groups. For elementary districts, we'll have 3. The focus groups are 3 major stakeholders at minimum: students, staff, and community members. For high school and unit districts, I also recommend alumni. The team will think about what questions to ask the focus group. Now, they're not personally asking them, we are asking them, but you have some absolute ownership, what you want people to respond to. It is so much more meaningful when stakeholders participate in a focus group and know that these are the inquiries that comes from the district team, not the auditor. So the team, you all, the adult team, will receive a bank of questions as optional. These are some questions for kids, for staff, for families, and so on. And you are provided direction during that phase 1. There's a whole presentation, but you are provided direction during that phase 1. What are the logistics of a focus group? How many people can participate? Who can participate? What is the structure of that? All of that gets ironed out during phase 1. So that's, we're all clear and what is to be expected. So phase 1, again, needs assessment, determining the quantitative data, and determining the questions that you all want to be asked of the focus groups. After phase 1 occurs, phase 2 and phase 3 occurs simultaneously. Phase 2 is the quantitative part, and that's where the district essentially has their homework and they're gathering all that data. So that does take several months. They are provided with the template, where they will be dumping all those raw numbers. And then phase 3 are the focus groups, which I conduct. And I have conducted them in all kinds of platforms. I've done them virtually or on site or a combination. All those nuances do get determined during phase 1. After that, phase 4. Phase 4 is now we've got all the data and we are analyzing it with my team, completely independent of the district. And then 5 is the report with the findings and recommendations. So before I go into anything else, let me see if anybody has questions.
I don't see any hands raised.
Okay. All right. Well, if change, please ask. All right. So after the equity audit, now what? I will tell you, it can be overwhelming. The findings. All the findings in the equity audit will already be organized using an accountability framework. An accountability framework that is it's proprietary and it's us, and you get permanent licensing if you go that direction, where you can utilize. And what it essentially is accountability framework for how we as a district decide we're going to identify objectives that are measurable, accountable, and align with different things we may have going on in the district. For example, should align with our strategic plan, should align with our mission and statement. It should align with a number of different policies and different things we have going on in the district. So they are guided throughout the process of when we come to the equity action plan, what that looks like. So as I've taken you to their equity audit process and this report is received, it can be absolutely overwhelming. And oftentimes district will say, now what? This is where the equity action plan comes in. So this is now year 2. This is where we can, you can imagine where the DELT group reconvenes. We haven't seen each other for 9 to 12 months, and they get a chance to review the report or the executive summary. It's an extensive report, at least 100 pages. It's quite in depth. It is research. The team will review, ask questions, and then we go through and prioritize these findings. And the team will decide, well, let's create this equity action plan and how this team is going to be critical in that. So let me pause. There's a question coming up in the chat. Yeah, great question. So I don't know if everybody sees. So when the DELT team determines what data to collect and what questions to ask, are they encouraged to say within the menu offered, or is there space for them to ask for data questions that are not on a menu? So two different things it sounds like. So the quantitative data that is going to be offered is a lot of data. So there's a list of 30 different pieces of data that the district is encouraged, multiple year data that the district is encouraged. Do we as a team have further conversation about, well, what other data are we missing? Absolutely. And I'm going to be honest, frank with you, every single district, every team oftentimes gets ambitious and say, yes, let's get all that data. It's good data for the equity audit. Great, we can agree. But sometimes the feasibility, whoever that is at the district or the team at the district that is gathering that data, in my experience, it's been interesting. The data that they wanted to collect, most of it they do, don't get me wrong, but there are hiccups in gathering the data. As they start gathering the data, they may find the data is not as clean as they had hoped, or the data has some gaps in it. So it doesn't negatively impact the equity audit if what we agreed upon in phase 1 doesn't actually roll out in what is provided by the district in data. But we can absolutely be ambitious, and you are not limited to that list of 30 different pieces of data that the district should consider gathering and collecting and synthesizing. So Christine, I hope I answered your question. Oh, and then the questions on the menu. I'm thinking you're probably thinking about the questions for the focus group. Yeah, those are just sample. You are not limited to those questions at all. And no team has ever said, yep, we'll just take these questions exactly as is. Every team has really good conversation about the semantics of some questions, or some questions that are not in there, that they want to be very purposeful and hoping that the focus groups respond to those questions.
I'm sorry.
Yes, no, you're good.
Clarify that once we select the questions for the focus groups, those won't change from focus group to focus group, or will they have the flexibility?
No, they will not change. So whatever we decide as a team, whatever the student questions is, that's it. That's what we're married to. Staff questions, community questions, right? So that will not change. And there are going to be different groups of questions for the different stakeholders that participate.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so it's year 2, the equity audit's done. We're looking at the report, and there's a dozen recommendations, let's say. Now what? So we reconvene the team. The team reviews the report, and we come together and we decide the next steps. Remember, I mentioned a minimum of 25 people. The reason being, the accountability framework that will be utilized has 5 strands, what I call 5 strands. You can call them 5 pillars, 5 core. And the 25 groups of people are going to be divided into, or minimum 25 groups of people are going to be divided into the 5 strands. So they're going to work very diligently on developing an objective. Yep. And that's the accountability framework. So for example, all 20, and people do get to self-select. So imagine year 2, we've got our equity audit in front of us. We're like, all right, now what? So all 25 of you will decide, well, which strand do I want to be on? Yes, you can only pick one. You're not going to work in silos, but you will be working with your strand to develop a goal that is measurable, accountable, and aligns with what came out of the district equity audit, as well as align with things that are already in place. In self-selecting, usually people self-select which strand they want to be on. There's only one person that doesn't have discretion to choose a strand, and that is the superintendent. She or he must sit on the system strand because of their relationship with the board. So when we divide DELT for the action planning time, you're going to be divided into these 5 strands. Systems. Systems has to deal with anything with policies, procedures, practices, initiatives, fiscal responsibility. So the people who are passionate about systems planning when it comes to organization, they will be encouraged to choose that strand. Teaching and learning. Anything to do with curriculum, assessments, instructional approaches, academic programs like our English language learner program and special education program, a 504 honors and gifted and AP assessments. That if that's what they're passionate about, that's what they would be encouraged to sit on. Student voice, climate culture. Here, we're going to have some conversations about discipline and SEL, trauma-informed practices, as well as the climate and culture among the adults in the organization. Professional learning. There is no end to the continuum of equity. The continuum and the paradigms related to equity are complex and deep. So this team will work on creating a long-term plan of what that could look like, how to ensure that we have some consistent language as part of our onboarding process. How do we offer opportunities for staff to maybe self-select based on where they feel they are at in the equity journey? And then last and certainly not least is family and community as an agency. How do we tap into our families and community to help us along the way in the equity journey? So with the accountability framework, each of these strands are critical. No one strand is more important than another. So what is a non-negotiable is that we can't say, oh, we're just going to come up with a system goal and neglect any other strand. There's no wiggle room in that. We must have a goal in each of the strands. The research is very clear that school systems, which are considered one of the most complex organizations in the United States, if we are committed to moving that equity needle forward, we need to look at it robustly. We need to look at it as a whole. So we need to establish a goal that's measurable in each of these strands. Here's going to be the challenge. Oftentimes, teams get really excited about thinking about goals, and they get rightfully frustrated that the work hasn't moved as fast enough. And so when teams come together and we think about, all right, let's think of all the things we can do under systems where we can improve it, and teaching and learning, and student voice, climate and culture, et cetera. A lot of wonderful, amazing, valued ideas come to surface. But the frustrating part is, what are we going to commit to for year 1 and year 2? So when teams come together for the equity action planning, they are planning for the following school year. So for example, let's say all of you were planning right now for 21-22 to commit to an equity action plan. You are all the planning, all the work, all the nuances, a lot of stuff that happens to get this going and create this template. You're planning for 22-23. And you're planning what is going to be done under systems, teaching and learning, student voice. Another reality, another barrier that is a frustration, rightfully so, is identifying those barriers right ahead in every nuanced task of the goal setting so that we can ensure and set ourselves up for success. So for example, under systems, let's say we come up, or you all really come up with an action plan, and maybe that action plan is adopting from the equity audit, or maybe you come up with something else that you feel is a priority. The equity audit is not an all-exhausting plan. There may be findings that you may wonder, well, this wasn't mentioned. That's a reality. It's for that limited time. But oftentimes they're pretty broad enough, and it shouldn't be surprising what comes out of equity audits, I think. But anyway, when the team decides on the systems approach, if they come up with a goal and they define what that is, and what specifically under systems that is an equity specific measurable goal, part of the conversation is talking about the personnel that's going to be needed for 22-23 for this imaginary scenario that I'm providing. Who's the personnel that's going to oversee it? What barriers or resources are in place or not in place to make sure it comes to fruition. So part of the process of the equity action plan is also capacity building among the people who are in it. So they realize that school systems are complex. And unlike many other institutions and sectors, and private sectors or non-for-profit sectors, which I work with as well, public school systems particularly are complex because of the nature of all the different stakeholders involved, the legal obligations that we have, and the professional autonomy that we want to offer, but never compromising centering students. So that being said, you can imagine if there's even one goal under each of the strands, that's 5 goals for 22-23. But it's not just 5 goals. Every goal, every nuance of every goal must be identified. So part of the equity action plan is identifying, okay, here's the goal. How do we get it done? Who's going to get it done? How much would this cost? What's the personnel? The best plans are those that are ironed out as best as possible, where we have had conversations that are robust and dynamic to ensure that, in fact, we can roll that out for that following year. Oh, I need to take a break. I threw a lot at you, but I want to pause for questions. Just processing the information.
I'm not seeing any questions in the chat either. And so we've tried to explain a lot of what you explained. We took notes and we did share it with the Equity Task Force prior to this meeting. So hopefully between our notes and your presentation now, that has limited to questions. But if anyone has anything, please speak.
Dr. Dubiel too, and we'll, as people are processing, if they have questions. One thing that was really interesting to me was the professional development strand. I know that is kind of a separate component of the work that you're able to do. I know our director of professional learning is on the call tonight, and part of what we want is from our task force is we definitely want to make sure we're able to provide some professional development for our teachers. So if you want to speak to that for just a few minutes, I know it's up to you how much time you have, but I'd love for you to at least be able to share a little bit about that as well. And that board, the board component that you talked with me about too, so.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for reminding me. So I have 2 major series of professional development. It's called the Equity, Anti-Bias, Anti-Racism Personal Development Series. It's the first series, it's a 9-hour series, and 9 hours to get in front of people is quite impossible. So there's a couple of things that can be done. Most districts divide that for 1 hour a month, so that every staff member is exposed to it. Everybody from teachers and paraprofessionals, support staff, custodial staff, bus drivers, I've had them all. Now, this is a 9-hour series, and this order that you see in front of you is the recommended order. I've had some districts that will maybe skip one of the sessions, and that's fine. The goal of this, because we know that people are at very different places when it comes to equity, whether they're novice or veterans, is common language, common vocabulary, common terminology, and a structured dialogue. I've had folks that participate in the PD more than once, and they have commented that it's different every time because it's with different people and the dialogue is always unique. So each of the sessions are designed for just 1 hour and they build upon each other. And so they get deeper and more in depth based on where they are in the series. But what you see there are the 3 learning objectives that can be expected in the equity in the professional development series. And I'm actually doing one tomorrow. I've got to update a couple of things because I'm always updating it as I have to keep tabs on the research and the scholarship associated with the work. So I'm always keeping tabs. So that's still the order, but I think the objectives may change a little bit. Now, I've had staff, as mentioned, all staff. It is the professional development series is designed where it does not matter what your role is. It is absolutely conducive to any role. It's not exclusive to teachers. We need everybody to engage in the dialogue and to have that common understanding. So that same series has been offered to board members. I've done 2 cohort of board members. I'll be running a 3rd. And board members tend to a little bit have more flexibility. So far I've done a board PDs on weekends, on Saturdays, like one Saturday a month, but it's 3 hours. So it's the same content. It's just the configuration of meeting with the stakeholders or the audience to participate in the PD is unique. And I've also offered this PD to community members, but they have to, it's only offered as partners for only partner community members, and they have to be recommended by superintendents. So everything is highly proprietary. Audio and video recording is not allowed in any of the professional developments. That's a non-negotiable. And there are community agreements that are expected for everybody to adhere to as we go in. Is it offered? Oh yeah, Christine, is it offered to non-certified staff as well? I have done this PD to probably over 10,000 people. So yes, paraprofessionals, support staff, certified staff, administrators, board members, bus drivers, custodians, food services staff, everybody should have, I think, that common, of course, I'm biased toward it, but I think everybody should have that common language, that foundational understanding to it. So there is something to be said when truly everybody does, your staff, your board, and community members. I think it could be extremely powerful to build that capacity. It doesn't end in a 9-hour series, obviously. This is a lifetime commitment, but I think you'll, knowing that we have some common vocabulary and positionality and understanding the paradigms of equity will absolutely be powerful. Now, the part 2 of the series is much more personalized. I've done that in cohort. I've done this PD, by the way, in cohort model too. Some districts are not ready or don't have the capacity to mandate PD. So they'll ask that to identify a group to first offer the PD as a cohort. Numerous configurations have been offered. So we always try to be flexible. So the second part of the series is much more intimate. It's with the smaller group of folks, 25 people, and it could be more volunteer, and it is action-based. So these are folks that will be doing some things that are pretty meaningful for them and for their colleagues as they engage in the learning. And that can range where they have to create a critical autonography to conducting some interviews, just a wide range where they're making it quite a bit more meaningful for themselves in engaging in the learning. And it's not exclusive to teachers. This was purposely designed for all.
Thank you for that debrief. That's perfect.
Yeah, how do new staff get now? That's a hard, thank you for asking that, Trisha. I forgot to mention that. That's where it gets a little bit tricky. What I tell staff is for onboarding, because you're right, you're going to get new staff. They're not going to have access to it. We're identify some people in your district that can facilitate PD with new staff, with new teachers as onboarding. They probably won't get this 9-hour series. In very rare cases, not rare, but there's been a few districts that will just, I have an annual commitment. They just know onboarding come August, I'm at site and we get not 9 hours, but we'll get 4 or 5. So I'm in front of new teachers and they'll get 4 or 5 hours PD. Not everybody has to do that, but we can talk about, and there have been some unique circumstances. I'll talk with key people at districts and we'll take bits and pieces that are not highly proprietary that I would suggest could be key things to offer to new staff as part of their onboarding. So they won't get it all, but we can certainly identify some critical pieces. I don't know if that, hopefully that answered your question. And then Trisha, one of the things I'll also add this, let's say You do the PD, the 9-hour PD, you know, you commit to 22, 23, and you do this 9-hour PD. Now what? What about 23, 24? The learning never ends. In my view, once we've established some common dialogue, some common understanding, offering opportunities for our staff to self-select into different levels of where they feel they are at when it comes to understanding equity. And this is hard. One of the challenging things when it comes to understanding anything related to DEI is the unlearning that has to take place. We are all part of a socialization cycle, and we have what is known are agents of socialization that impact us, influence us, influence our decisions. We are raised by humans. We have relationships with other humans, and as a result, they impart biases towards us and vice versa. And not all biases are bad. That comes out of the PD. We'll talk about the 100 forms of different biases that our brains automatically generate. But in our socialization process, we do often receive unconscious negative biases towards others. And it doesn't have to be a direct teaching, through media, through different forms of socialization. And so to unlearn that can be challenging. We are oftentimes limited by our experiences and our backgrounds. And to be vulnerable in the unlearning, to be vulnerable, how may any of us, all of us, have contributed to biases. Nobody is innocent from it. It's just part of human nature. No one can turn off 100% of their negative implicit bias. Our brains are too sophisticated to allow that to happen. But that doesn't mean we cannot significantly decrease biases, and it doesn't occur by accident. It occurs by absolute action. And so even in that action, we have to learn, we have to develop our capacity. So following some common language, there's going to be folks who participate in the PD, might go in one ear, not the other, or they're not committed, or they're still very novice to this. There's a lot of unlearning, a lot of vulnerability. They're not quite sure what this means. And there's a whole lot of misinformation, misguided information, dangerous narratives associated with DEI. There's no question about that. But what is a non-negotiable, what is a core understanding of equity work is that this is about humanity. And this is about care and love for fellow human, and being in the education field where we are not only providing academics to our young people, but we are educating the whole child. We have to understand what DEI means and how we can support and leverage and value each of our students through academics, through emotions, through a number of different environmental pieces that can absolutely impact their learning. And as we are shaping these young people in academics, as well as educating their whole child, we need to do that for staff too. And so staff are at different places when it comes to that. So after establishing that common language, I'm a big proponent of having staff then self-select a tier. We talk about the different tiers where they can continue to build their capacity. So maybe it's a book study. Maybe they're actually a culturally responsive educator, and we can see evidence of that in class, and they would open their classroom doors to model that for other teachers. Maybe they are somebody who's making a difference in the world. Whatever it may be, maybe they want to engage in book studies with community members and kiddos. So all those little pieces get done. But as staff gets to self-select where they're at in the tier, they would have to determine where they're at. And I think that's what we can expect from year to year. So after that initial year of common language, I think when we offer an opportunity where staff can self-select to continue to build their capacity, can be absolutely powerful. All right, a question came in. Could you talk about how you measure success? So I can, on my website, I am not going to mention a district specific. This is, hey, look at districts. I will tell you this. You can see on my website, there are the districts that I've been doing equity audits. They're not all listed there, just so you know, but all the districts equity audit, all the districts equity action plan. What I will tell you is this: how a district evaluates their success is by making sure that they stay on task and they are carrying out the goals that they themselves have stated. Once that equity action plan is completed by the team, unless we continue a relationship, and most do, unless we continue a relationship, it is the team. So if, again, let's say this was 21-22, you are equity planning for 22-23. I've worked with you in 21-22 to create that plan. You will be keeping tabs on yourselves and each other to making sure you're rolling out that plan. I certainly can't force it. So what we know that is important is that we are transparent. When we are transparent in the plan, when we present to our board about the plan at the beginning or at the end, or even once a year, we're making it very clear. And I think we're committing to our stakeholders, communicating to our stakeholders that this is important to us and this is what we're communicating. I can't really compare yours to another because every equity action plan is so different. And it will 100% have to do with resources as well as where the community is at and understanding equity. There are some community that get it. They're committed to this. They know that this is foundational to schools, and there's no question they're coming up with goals that are comprehensive. They're coming up with goals that are reconstructive. And then other districts that, they've had some goals in place for each of the 5 strands, but a lot of it is they're just doing some research right now. They're just getting comfortable in understanding this. And so that could be a district similar size to yours, but their plan is very different just because of where their district is at in the journey.
So Dr. Dubio, can you speak to, I know when we met with you're really busy, as we heard at the very beginning of the introductions, and you're working with a lot of groups, you're involved in, state consortiums and things like that. So we wouldn't be able to get on your docket, so to speak, for a little time here. But you'd shared with Brandon and I that our group, this group that you're working with right now, that there's a lot of pre-work that we can do to get ready for the process. So in our notes, Brandon and I shared with the team, kind of a bulleted list of what some of those things are. But do you want to speak to that for just a minute? Because while we may not get to the self-evaluation stage with you per se till January, there's a lot of self-evaluation and needs assessment work that we need to do as kind of pre-work.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for the group, this is making an assumption on my part that the group is diverse in representation. So, community members, staff, maybe students. So it's important to have some common language and some common understanding in regards to data before they complete the needs assessment. That would be great. Because again, most DELT teams are staff members, so they're familiar, but when we have diverse representation that are not staff, they may not be unfamiliar. So I think understanding the structure of how from board policies to our data when it comes to discipline, what we report to the state that we're mandated to report to the state. Could there be additional data that we can collect and I report to the state? Of course, absolutely. Multiple year data, how we can disaggregate data by identities like race and gender and special populations, EL, free and reduced lunch, and what am I missing? I said special education, EL, yeah. So those are the 3 special populations that were mandated to report to the state. So I think having an understanding of those pieces of data, the different title, if we have title schools, how that works, how that a lot of these programs like EL and special education as well as titles, they have been designed by U.S. Supreme Court rulings to advance equity and to leverage equity. So how they actually look in schools can be different, even to curriculum. Just today, so I was gone all day conducting focus groups on site for a district for their equity audit. And just talking to the students, having an opportunity to talk to them. And this rarely happens where I get they spend some lunchtime with me. So I get to spend some casual conversation with them, but just helping them understand, well, what is curriculum, and helping understand the standards and how Common Core standards and how it's a remake, if you will, of No Child Left Behind, and the discretion that districts have with creating curriculum that adheres to standards. And then we also have the obligation of state mandates. Again, school systems, a complicated organization, and yet we still have to respect the professionalism of educators to differentiate differentiates based on their students in classroom instruction and materials, and textbooks are not a curriculum, but a resource. So I think that 411, if you will, of all the nuances of an education, I think having that aha will be very helpful, even if it doesn't impact the needs assessment. But your team should, feel good about the decisions and the conversations they're having, because they will be tapped, I think, by community members like, hey, what is this DEI work? And we want to set them up for success. We want to give them the knowledge. We're not hiding anything. We want to be transparent, and share with them what we know, and the systems in place, and the barriers that we're all dealing with.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Any final questions or other thoughts from the team? Okay, Dr. Dubio, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I know it's late and you've been on the road and it's been a busy day for you. So we appreciate you spending a little time with us this evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation, and a pleasure. It was nice to virtually meet you all. Be safe.
Thank you.
I'm going to exit. Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Okay. I'm not sharing him. I know. Okay. All right, what were people's thoughts? We have talked to her about coming to, if we decided that we wanted to work with her, that she would be able to come to do an initial board meeting, kind of a very similar overview, maybe not an hour. We'd kind of have her pare it down a little bit, but have her come and do a basic overview with the Board of Education, and kind of share, our steps moving forward, and what we'll be able to get out of our work with her. Ms. Smith and I, Yvonne and I, have been talking about how we might pay for her services. So we have Title II professional development funds, which are grant funds that are specifically designated for professional learning. So we have some professional learning to work with PD, consultants and contractors, and specifically set aside for this work. Now, we haven't earmarked it for equity, but that is one of our main priorities. And so we can definitely utilize our Title II funds to pay for her contractual services, which is great. Carol will be really happy about that. So, other questions that you guys have, or thoughts or concerns, or what'd you think of her just in general? I mean, oh, Elizabeth. So when would she actually be? So right now she's mentioned, right? She's working with a couple of school districts right now. Lupe is part of her consortium, which is nice, which is part of the Illinois consortium, which we are members of, which is helpful when we get to the point where we need to do some of this work, not in the public. I have some of these conversations that would allow us to be in more of a closed session. We have that language in the OMA that would allow us to do that. But to answer your question, Elizabeth, she is not available to really spend like the hours that she talked about in phase 4 with us until January. So that's why I wanted to ask her about the pre-work. So I know we meet in November and December. So she said it would be really, really helpful if we spend some time as a group. In the notes that Brandon and I shared with you guys, at the very end of that, like she started talking about, knowing about the Illinois report card, the 5 essentials data, standards, curriculum, funding, budgeting, how we do family engagement, what our model is, because those are the kinds of things. When she asked us to complete this self-evaluation and this needs assessment, we need, everybody in the group really kind of needs to know what those things are. It's not really meaningful for the self-evaluation process if we have people who don't know what is an in-school suspension and how does that work and what does that look like. So She thought it would be very useful for us as a group to have discussions about those, that kind of list of, she just gave us a few to begin with. And I would actually go back there and ask her for a more comprehensive list, but this was a beginning point of some things that we can do with our time. So we don't just have this big gap from, we don't meet again until January, that we can keep kind of doing some of the work to prepare for the audit, if that makes sense. Any other questions? What do you think about the professional development? That part was really just really exciting for me to hear how we can have so many commonalities and all these intersections happening, through all of this, the audit, the action plan, the professional learning, all the groups that could participate. So
I have a question about the professional development, Jennifer.
Mhm.
In terms of non-certified staff, like the TAs, the support staff in the high school, middle school, the hall monitors, because those are people that are critical to the culture and climate and also contribute to disciplinary things too, since they're the ones monitoring the halls. Is there funding that they will be compensated for their Saturday to spend doing this professional development? Because I think it's important for everybody to have the opportunity or the requirement, depending on how you frame it, to participate. But will there be funding that they will be compensated for their time to do that?
Excellent question. So I don't know if there was a lot of verbiage on her form, but most of those 9 sessions, they can be an hour, and she said, or up to 90 minutes. So we would try to keep them to an hour because that really fits with our kind of our after school model for our staff meetings and things like that. So part of professional, I know Yvonne's, we haven't even talked about this, but part of the Title II professional learning, part of that grant is that we can pay stipends. I know Todd might have some money, for some of the special ed TAs to make sure they're compensated, but then our TAs who are not special ed TAs, we would pay them, like maybe we have one Monday a month that is reserved for one of those 9 sessions, that we would make sure that they got that additional hour paid for. So yes, there would be. Now, lunchroom people, right? Yvonne's saying yes. So lunchroom, I know she mentioned bus drivers. We probably wouldn't include bus drivers, but if we did, first student would, have to compensate them. But I kind of feel like as a group, if we have lunchroom people that are willing to come back at 3:30 for a meeting, then they should get compensated for that hour of PD if they're willing to come back. Or any of our part-time staff too, like we have people who are like half-time TAs or so yeah, I in order for us to have this common language across the district, everybody needs to have the opportunity. So yep.
Dr. Ivory Tatum, just as a point of clarification, I believe the Saturday PDs are offered for board members only, and that what we would offer for staff members would happen during a traditional workday or during in-service days or whatever kind of professional development schedule that we build, not on Saturdays.
Yes, I should have said that, Christy. The Saturdays, when she was saying board members have a little more flexibility. So she actually shared with us that she even does a board member cohort on Sundays, and board members from all over the state can join in for those. So, but yes, ours would happen Monday through Friday, either staff development days, opening days, 3:30 to 4:30 after school days. Rachel, in the past few years, has there been similar PD offered? And if so, it's been several years, Rachel. I'd say other people here who were here maybe when I wasn't, would that racial equity PD that we were doing, did that end in 2017 or 2018? I'm looking at like Shauna or Beth or Lupe or people like that who were helping lead that. I can't remember, but yes, Rachel, but it's been several years. So since that time, even some of the sessions that she talked about, like I remember we had sessions on microaggressions and we had sessions on isms and things like that. But we've had so much turnover since then, and so many, like half the people in this Zoom call probably, weren't here at that time. So whoever asked the question, Tricia, about orienting new staff, that is going to be critical. And that'll be something that we'll work through with Yolanda on, like that new teacher mentoring strand and, building some of those sessions into the after school work that the new teachers do throughout the year. But yeah, there have been so much turnover. I mean, like, I don't know that I could say a number, but I'd say probably 40 to 50% of our staff are new since we did those trainings years ago.
Jennifer, I would say that we probably, the last year that we fully implemented it to the professional development to this level was probably 17-18, the 18-19 school year. It definitely was a reduced leadership team. So I wouldn't say that we were doing the professional development to the level that we had in years past.
Mm-hmm.
I think some of the strands are similar, but but I completely agree with what she said. You can do a similar strand from year to year, and the conversations will be different, and people will get something different out of them just because of the makeup of the group that you're in. So I think that's okay if we've had, similar conversations about some of the, initial layers. And I know as an admin team, we've had some of those conversations, but it would still be a different outcome, I think, depending on who's in the group.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. And I think that even, like she said, sometimes staff repeat the PD or do the trainings multiple times. And I just think that it's just a process to like change your brain, like changing your thinking, and everybody's going to be at a different place. So I feel like that is going to be, even for those of us that were a part of those PDs and all those discussions, when it was I did some with one of my schools, did some with others, and then I did some district stuff. And it was just, it all did come out differently just because of the combination of people and the discussion. So, and I think that repetition sometimes and continuing to come back to those same topics, it really does help to kind of keep those thoughts in your head and to really kind of, when you're in your everyday, like being able to start changing your brain and the way that you approach things and people and all that. So.
Mm-hmm. So I'm looking at our time, it's 6:56. So we didn't have anything else on the agenda. The majority of our time tonight was intentionally to kind of walk through the steps of what the equity audit process and the planning might look like. I feel like I'm getting a good sense from everybody, but I would, really, this is the opportunity to share, like, is this somebody that we feel like we can move forward with? I think she offers a really comprehensive package, that we would be able to get our audit, have some support with our planning, as well as professional learning kind of, and not have to work with different people and different external folks to get that work done. So what are people thinking? Because I really want to get on her schedule to have her come for a board meeting. And I know how busy she is. So
does she have any additional staff members she works with, or is it just her that presents and things like that?
Good question. Yes, I asked her that when Brandon and I met with her. So she says she has a team of 4 other people that work with her.
4 or 5. As a team of researchers that does the data analysis, and I believe 2 or 3 others to have a part of the process.
But she did say, because that was one of my questions about the focus groups, is I asked her point blank, do you come out and do those, or are you gonna like send your people? And she said no, she comes and she sits in every single focus group, and she said those are led by her. Like she said today, she was doing focus groups in a district, because I want to have people who are really committed and hearing, it matters if you have 8 student groups, but you've got 5 different people meeting with those groups. You're not going to get the consistency, or you're not going to get the patterns. You're not going to hear all the nuances. So she does all of that. And she said she's committed to that. So that was really important for me. Thank you for asking that, because I forgot to say that. So people are chiming in the chat. Okay, well, I'll continue to work with Yvonne. She offers a few options, right? Like the different levels of PD. If we want to do everything, you know, there's of course a different price package. If we just do the audit, or if we do the audit and the plan, if we do the audit, the plan, and incorporate the PD. But we have money entitled to cover all of that. So, you know, we can cover all of that through our grant funds. So that is good to hear and good to know. And based on the people that are chiming in, it looks like people are feeling pretty comfortable with us kind of continuing to have conversations with her. So I'll work and get on her calendar, and you guys feel free to go in and look at some of I know I shared the screen, but you know, you can kind of go in and dig a little deeper into, you know, what was in our agenda. So, and then on that note, it is almost 7. So I think, Paul, if somebody. Oh.
Yeah, so it's all right. Is there a motion to adjourn for this evening?
I make a motion to adjourn for the evening.
Is there a second?
Second. Gismer, second.
All right. All in favor, I guess, hit your raise your hand in the chat. Okay, great. I guess you go ahead and clear it now. And any opposed, raise your hand. Yeah, I think the ayes have it. Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Thanks, everyone. We'll be in touch with more info. Have a good night. Thanks, Paul.
See you tomorrow.